That's a little different than our usual theme song. That's actually the third movement of my piano quintet, which is based on the Funky Friday theme. So it's the same raw material, same motif, more or less. Just it's a different transposition and everything. And it goes into this passage. And I play that for a reason. I play that because this is our third episode of the music series that I'm sort of calling Inside the Music, or kind of getting inside the music a little bit. And when we last left off, I was talking about working on my ears and starting to develop compositional ideas, but mainly from the point of view of being a pianist, and the point of view of playing solo piano, playing with trios, and playing in the rhythm section with what you call jazz bands and groups and that kind of thing. And so what I'm going to talk about today, and this is kind of interesting, we're going to go from a piece I wrote this year, end of summer, fall. I finished this. That's called Get Down, by the way. That's the last movement. I'm interested in kind of, not the first time I've done a rhythmic type of thing like that that's funky. That title, Get Down. We're going to go back now in time to 1992. And why? Because we're going to give a listen to the very first orchestra piece I ever wrote. I would have been 24 years old, and there's a kind of a story here. I was sort of finishing up my studies of piano and playing, as I said, around Boston, playing at groups. And, I sort of felt like, I was very, I had a lot of really, I think, special kind of one-of-a-kind opportunities and experiences, because I got to see, for example, I was in George Russell's ensemble, and part of George Russell, working with him, we got to actually do gigs in Boston under his direction. But part of the joy of George Russell is that, he wrote for and worked with John Coltrane and Bill Evans, and he would talk about them, and he would talk about the 50s and the 60s. And so it was great hearing those stories. On the classical side of things, I got to meet Oliver Messiaen. I saw him do a seminar on his quartet for the End of Time. And so, of course, I was very interested in writing for more instruments. Now, here's the thing, though. The only time I did it was in high school. That little piece I wrote, if you recall, for that Lost to History, Lost Forever, for that alto saxophonist, I forget the name of the saxophonist name. I'm sure hopefully he'll contact us and kind of say, what was me? Any event, I met a composition teacher and a composition kind of music guru who was very prolific. I mean, this guy could write a symphony in a week. He had that kind of mind. And his name was Thomas McKinley. And I liked him for a couple of reasons. I liked him because he was interested in tonality, as I was and am. And so he was kind of somebody who was very, I don't know if adamant is the word, but his music was not atonal or non-tonal. And also he was able to get me gigs writing for really, really interesting ensembles. And he said to me, Mitch, you need to write for orchestra. And we're going to record it. We're going to record it in Poland, Warsaw. Was it Warsaw? No, it was Katowice. It was an industrial town in Poland. And Katowice, I think it was a Katowice radio orchestra. Now, you have to say this is 1992, first orchestra piece. And I thought, well, what can I do for orchestra? Came up with the idea. Do you folks know, I'm not the person to play it because I'm rusty, but the Minute Waltz by Chopin, it's sort of a D flat major, kind of a little waltz. It's opus. It's opus 64 vowels, and so that piece. Now notice something about the harmony. Now Chopin deserves his own episode. I'm not the person to do it. Ashkenazi is not with us, I don't think, and Rubinstein and those cats, they would be the person to do it. But I did study Chopin very deeply, and I thought, well, I'm going to write a 3-minute waltz based on Except this is what I did. So I start with the motif that Chopin used. I said, I'm going to do a contemporary, I'm going to try to write for orchestra the kind of the harmonic language I like, and the kind of, the kind of stuff I had been doing in the jazz world, jazz field. And I'm just going to totally go for it. I'm not going to be, what's the word, hemmed in or constrained by stuff people had done before. So I'm going to have a European classical setting, an orchestra. I'm going to play it for you right now. I'm going to cue it up. But this is the score. 3-minute waltz, 1992. I don't quite make 3 minutes. I think it's 2 minutes and 30 seconds or something, 38 seconds. But you can see here, this is before digitization of scores and software. I hope everything's clear. Usually my producer kind of, I say hi to the producer, Laurie, and sort of hope everything. So I'm going to try to cue this up here. Now, I'm sort of trying to realize in an orchestral setting the kind of harmonic style that I really like. And it's the very, if you recall my meeting with Samuel Adler, he said, don't do this. Doesn't belong in the classical world. It belongs in the club or only improvise. I said, no, I'm going to write what I want to write. And Tom McKinley, he gave me a lot of freedom. I did it with a lot of years able to be part of projects that he sort of engineered. He was kind of a very, very crafty, I would say, he's very prolific musically, more than some people are just gifted that way. They just write very fast. And he was one of them. But also he had a lot of connections to the music world, the classical world. And so I was like, my work was done at Wigmore Hall in London. This was I think my flute sonata chamber. We'll get into all that today. We'll get into, not all of it, but at least as much of it that's appropriate. But let's try to find this 3-minute waltz. And I apologize if the audio is not the most clear, but we'll see, we're in a new world now of things like this, right? We're kind of into this new world. It's interesting. I think I'll just put it here. And I should probably do that digital score. You know how in the YouTube videos they're very slick with the software and the score. And I'm not going to I'm going to follow along, but you're going to just use your ears and kind of let's see here what we got. Well, that's the 3-minute waltz, and it's got that same hold on here. Uh-oh. It's ominous. So it has that same perpetual motion thing of the waltz, you know, the kind of like a carousel that Chopin was doing. But if you listen, the harmonies are totally a whole other thing. And you know, it's kind of interesting because I have it's very compact and it has kind of, you know, let's see here. So if this is the motif, I also quoted this other Chopin waltz. I quoted that one, and I also quoted some other things. I also so we have this. These are things that were not available, or they weren't in the common practice of the 19th century. You know, and so this kind of that's a kind of the cowboy western kind of Copeland feeling. I put that in there for a little, you know, jauntiness and kind of just trying to really writing from my feelings as, you know, the music that I love and wanting to write that language for the orchestra. And so I think it works. That's a 3-minute waltz. After that, I started doing more ambitious projects. If we want to talk about harmony a little bit, I got a little thing here that this is from John Adams' memoir, and he writes a lot in here about music, of course, and harmony. But he has a little let's see here. Well, first of all, he talks about some of my favorite cats. He talks about, you know, he says, I was struck by the fact that the harmonic essence of the early popular American composers like Gershwin, Cole Porter, Rodgers, and Ellington was not all that different from the chromaticism of the late Romantic composers. Well, that's true. He goes on to talk about John Coltrane, but he says something. He sort of John Adams, a composer of Nixon in China, and he has a work coming out this year. I think a kind of a major a new premiere. I think I posted about it on Facebook. But he says, direct quote, forging a personal harmonic language has always been the essential challenge for a composer. While there are many other elements that contribute to a composer's uniqueness, the rhythmic drive, the sense of color, the contrapuntal density, the ability to evoke atmosphere, even the melodic profile, none is as critical as the harmony. Therein lies a work's essential genome, the identifying DNA that gives it character and makes it special and memorable. Now, that's interesting. So I wasn't far off in focusing on that, trying to find my own language. And of course, that's all, none of it really comes from me. It's all things from people who I was inspired by, who I loved, teachers, older music, traditions, things that came before me, and I just want to contribute to it. So here's an interesting thing. I wrote a chamber concerto that I had premiered in New York City, I think, as well as never got a proper recording of it, but It's called Night Creatures. And it has like 3 different movements. Now, this is a chamber piece. So it's sort of, let's see, what was it? Clarinet. Forget what the instrumentation was. It was like violin, clarinet, piano, flute, kind of a little ensemble, chamber ensemble. And I got an idea. I was always, I'm always influenced by non-musical things, like movies and novels and poetry and theater and just life experiences and things. Even though I don't think music is representational at all, or at least not with any specificity. It's a little more abstract than that. I am inspired by lots of things. And so I wrote Night Creatures when I was if I was 24 with the 3-minute waltz. This would have been 26, 27, I think. And I was really at that time for those years interested in certain kinds of horror movies. And so I thought, well, how can I create here's the question, philosophic, practical question. How can I create this kind of really feeling of emotional tension or suspense or foreboding, but within a tonal context? Now, in other words, without having it be, it won't be like that, but it'll have a little bit approaching the emotion of that, but only approaching it, not fully, staying in. There's a lot of, this idea of expanded tonality, because tonality could be, of course, all kinds of, I'm improvising here, so I don't know really fully what I'm doing, but I came up with this idea of, I'll play a little bit of the piano parts on the part. So this is the first movement, and it's the entire piece, by the way, is dedicated to anybody awake during the night. So that's the subtitle. So. So I'm building the suspense, but I'm going into a recognizable harmonic system. But somewhere, I'm not going to play this piece. I'm just going to. So we have that kind of. And all of a sudden, so you can see it's really gothic, and it's got that kind of, that feeling. And, I don't normally, I really don't write that way much anymore. I don't write that way at all, really. I mean, it's kind of interesting, but I'm if you can hear, I'm developing So there's a passage like this. And, you know, I'm trying to so it suggests, you know, so E flat minor. Now that's what I would call functional tonality. There's a function. Because there's movement. You can do that. Those figures. But the kind of coloristic tonality, or I don't know what to call it, I call it not less functional, is using, you know, but you can do this. To create a feeling or a mood that's not tied to, you know, what people think of when they think of traditional harmonic. And of course, that's completely improvised, so it hasn't really been worked out by me, not even before this episode. So I got the opportunity to write a piano concerto. I got to play it at Lincoln Center. So this is Lincoln Center. And it's a concerto for improvised jazz, piano, and orchestra. Now, I started getting the idea of what if I divided up my score and had some things be totally written and then other things be totally improvised. And I think that would be, I think that, you know, I worked out, you know, again, it's the influence of the big bands. I was trying to write things. So if you can see here, look at the score here. Here it is. I'm just going to play the solo. I'm going to play a little bit, not the recording, but I'm going to kind of. This is from the second movement, and it's It was written for Antonio Carlos Jobim. That's who it's dedicated to. And so again, we're back to some of that sort of more moody kind of stuff. So. That comes from Maurice Ravel, of course. That's from his concerto. I mean, it's not a direct steal, but it's sort of the idea of because I and so on. I'm trying to write. I was trying then to write in this piece. Something right at the breaking point. It's right on the edge, and it's kind of you kind of wonder, is there a release? Well, yeah. I go. So, is there a release for the listener? So it's right, it's melodic, but it's also like so that was so many years ago, and I play that now and I listen to it. I'm thinking, well, so what I'm doing now is I'm actually interested in pulling back from that kind of density, and right now I'm writing very lean, much leaner music. And I'm interested in exploring different things. And then that's, writing concertos. Here's something else I'm going to play for you. I got opportunity to write for a double concerto, flute and clarinet. And they were two really of the best. So Richard Stolzman, clarinet. My friend, I was close to him at that time, Mike Feingold, flute. And I was able to, write very virtuosic music for them. And this would have been, 1998. I have to find it here because I don't know. Where am I? Let's see here. Here we go. Finally. Is it queued up? No, it isn't. No, it's not. Here we go. So all that was written out for them. That's not improvised. It's all written. Those parts are written. And as you can hear, I'm starting to get more into popular language ideas. Much more. That was 1998, 99. So, and then I decided, I stopped, at that time I was not writing as much for larger ensembles. I thought, well, why don't I go back to piano? Why don't I just do solo piano music of my own creation that's partly improvised and partly written? I said, I'll call it hard listening. And I did this album. First album. Produced this album. And I did there's two volumes. This is volume 1. And it's a kind of really an extension of what I was doing with the orchestral things. It was really but more, it's an extension of that, but a little more I think unafraid on my part. In other words, so it's kind of the willingness to embrace what you love and what you do. And it's interesting. It actually connects to something I just wrote about this very issue, about embracing what you love and what you know, and kind of basically, working with that. That's your tools. And so that's kind of there's a this is one of the, I don't know, I don't remember what this is called. I think this is called I forget what the I'm going to play it here because I'm at the piano. I might as well play the thing. Oh, this is called Crossover Hit. And it's again. I went off on a totally different. That's actually, I stopped playing what I recorded, and just now got an idea to do something different. But anyhow, I'm using so musical styles plural language. So that's a harmonic motion that Harold Arlen used in "Come Rain or Come Shine," right? But Harold Arlen was tricky. He does. He does. Interesting, right? So that part of the song, or those two or three measures, they're like little they're what do I call them? So the idea of hard listening music is that the entire scope of the music is made up of these little gestures that have been done a million times by composers in Hollywood and in the Brill Building and Burbank Studio and Hollywood, and Broadway. And, I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting to create a music where all the motifs and all the raw material are the very things that Samuel Adler told me not to do. And can you transform that? And I thought, well, it makes sense to me because I sort of figured that's what I've been doing. So, the piece I opened up with that, those are, that's from dance music, so I kind of have this, so there's a lot. I'm improvising now, and I'm sort of making this up. But that's kind of that piece of spontaneous improvisation is actually in keeping with this hard listening idea. Now, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of fun, and I've written a lot of music. I mean, I wrote something for Laurie Strickland called Ruby Lorraine's, our producer, about her car called Ruby Lorraine's Dream Car. It Gets a Tune-Up, I think it was called, and that's actually the similar kind of dance. Well, you'll hear it. It's a an improvised section after that. But that's you know, comes out of dance music and dance music of the late '70s, early '80s, you know. And but you know, when I write something, I always have to have dramatic contrast. So if I have something like that, I got to do something, you know, that's really contrast. I added another section. That's something I added just now, but so I can go on like that for some time. Gonna drink some of this coffee here. So I've covered a lot of ground, I think, today. When I was 24, 1992, first orchestra piece. My development of this solo piano style in the mid, I think it starts, when did I develop that? I think it was 20, you know, it was actually the year that my father died. So it was 2011 that I actually started working on that. And because I wrote an elegy piece for him that was on my first hard listening, based on his favorite song. I love the song, but song about reincarnation, you know, Rodgers and Hart, where, when. My dad thought it was a reincarnation song, but and so that's now going on 10 years, because now 2022, and you know, I'm going to continue to do it. And I have this new, if there's any string quartets out there, I'd love to do this piece with you. You know, I'm going to digitize it and have a digital score for everybody, and be nice to do it. So you can only write so much. I'm a slow writer. I don't write a lot of music. You know, I look, you know, I've written, I just write at the pace that I have to write at. You know, I can't, you know, it's interesting. It's so, you know, I want to say a few things spontaneously about art and what it means and what it is. So there's artists that have to work slowly, and they only write a thing a year. And then there's Thomas McKinley, that person I study with, and he was extremely prolific. I dare say he was almost glib, I think. I mean, I think he knows a lot I can say about it, but what I mean is that it was a kind of effortlessness, you know. He just wrote. That's him, and that's what he did, and that was his thing. And my thing is just slow. It's not evaluative. In other words, it isn't like slow is not more profound than fast. Neither is it slow as in mentally challenged. No, it's just slow. Just like some things are fast. Some things are just a burst of energy. You know, like a movie might announce itself to the world. I'm this movie. I'm going to come in. The hero comes in, you know, swaining, and comes in strong. And then there's other movies where the hero, like the movie Wanda, where Barbara Loden speaks kind of quietly and kind of speaks in a corner. Different kinds of people in the world. It just has to be different kinds of music that's soft, music that's fast, you know. And so I feel like right now I'm going to continue to do things at the pace that's comfortable for me. And so it's kind of you know, when I do these things, I always leave a bunch of stuff out, but I figure, well, we've been here for about an hour, and I'm going to say, I'm going to play a little something, I think, probably to close out, not too long. And so come up with an idea. Well, this. Happy New Year and have a good weekend, everybody. Thanks.